If the only person who believes you're in danger is the one person everyone else thinks is crazy, do you trust them, or do you trust your own dissolving sanity? The Ardham building stood like a forgotten monolith in the city's grimy underbelly, a testament to a grandeur long since stripped away by time and neglect. Its faded Art Deco facade, once sleek and commanding, was now merely a canvas for the persistent late autumn rain to streak and stain. The air, perpetually damp and smelling of old dust and something metallic Maya couldn't quite place, hung heavy in the narrow, high-ceilinged hallways. But to Maya, stepping over the threshold for the first time, it was a beginning, a fresh canvas, even if a damp and decaying one. She'd convinced herself it was perfect. The price was right. The light, surprisingly, streamed in through the tall, arched windows of her new unit, and it was far, far away from everything that had come before. A sanctuary, a place where the shattered pieces of her life could finally settle, perhaps even fuse back together. "It's got character," Ben said, hoisting a particularly heavy box marked Fragile, Glass, Hope up the 3 flights of creaking stairs. He managed a strained smile, his breath misting in the cool hallway air. Ben, always supportive, always trying to lighten her load, physical or otherwise. He was a sturdy anchor in her storm-tossed world, even if he didn't fully understand the depths of the trauma she carried. No one truly could. The apartment itself was a sprawling one-bedroom with high ceilings and a tiny, ancient kitchen. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet like an old ship, and the single bathroom boasted fixtures that looked like they'd seen a century of scrubbing. But the living room, with its vast windows overlooking a tangle of wet, leafless trees, felt open, almost hopeful. It was here, amidst the stacks of boxes, that Maya began to truly believe in her fresh start. Hours later, the last box was unpacked, at least partially. Ben had ordered pizza, its greasy warmth a comforting counterpoint to the chill that seeped in from outside. They sat on the floor, surrounded by the nascent order of a new home. Maya held up 2 cheap plastic cups filled with a sparkling cider she'd found in a forgotten corner of a box. "To peace," she murmured, her voice a little unsteady but laced with a fragile optimism. Ben clinked his cup against hers, his eyes kind. "To peace, Maya, and to safety." The words hung in the air, the silent acknowledgement of the safety she hadn't felt in so long, a promise she desperately hoped this new place would keep. That night, the Ardham building began to speak. It started subtly, a barely perceptible tap-tap-tapping from the ceiling directly above her bed. It was rhythmic, almost like a metronome, but irregular enough to be organic. At first, Maya dismissed it. Old building, settling, pipes, the wind. She turned on a meditation app on her phone, the gentle sounds of ocean waves attempting to drown out the intrusion. But even through the artificial calm, the tapping persisted, a tiny, insistent drumbeat against the silence. It was late, past 2 in the morning. She was exhausted, yet her mind, ever vigilant, refused to truly rest. The next few days were a blur of unpacking and arranging, trying to imbue the stark space with a sense of herself. The tapping continued, occasionally escalating into a soft dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floorboards upstairs. It was sporadic, always late at night or in the very early hours of the morning. Maya tried to rationalize it, a neighbor moving furniture, perhaps practicing an instrument, but the sounds felt wrong, disjointed, and always above her. She met Lena, her next-door neighbor, in the narrow hallway one afternoon. Lena was a woman of indeterminate age, with wide, curious eyes and a smile that seemed a little too eager. She carried a basket of freshly laundered clothes, its scent momentarily masking the building's perpetual mustiness. "New neighbor, right?" Lena's voice was bright, a little too loud for the confined space. "I'm Lena. Welcome to Artem." She extended a hand, her grip firm. "Heard a bit of commotion from your unit the other day. Just settling in?" Maya managed a polite smile. "Maya, yes, still getting there. It's an old building, isn't it? Very atmospheric." Lena chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "Oh, it has its quirks. Thin walls for sure. You'll get used to it. Been here almost 5 years myself. Know all its little secrets." Her gaze lingered on Maya for a beat too long, an unreadable glint in her eyes. "Let me know if you need anything at all. A friendly face in a new place can make all the difference, right?" Maya thanked her, feeling a prickle of unease. Lena's friendliness felt less like genuine warmth and more like an assessment. The sounds from upstairs grew bolder, more pronounced. The dragging became heavier, punctuated by what sounded like muffled thuds. Then came the whispers. Soft, indistinct, like secrets being told just beyond the realm of comprehension. Maya would press her ear against the ceiling, her heart hammering against her ribs, straining to catch a coherent word, but they always remained just out of reach, a murmuring tide of unintelligible dread. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford. Every creak of the building, every groan of the ancient pipes, every distant wail of an ambulance outside became magnified, twisted into something sinister by her exhausted mind. Her hypervigilance, a scar from a past she desperately tried to outrun, flared to life, a constant, gnawing anxiety beneath her skin. One night, the muffled thuds escalated into what sounded undeniably like whimpers, a choked, desperate sound that tore through the thin ceiling, through her carefully constructed piece, and straight into the raw wound of her trauma. It wasn't a pipe. It wasn't the wind. Someone was in distress up there. Someone was hurting. She called Ben, her voice tight with frayed nerves. "It's getting worse, Ben. I swear, I hear crying now. Real crying. It's not just the building." Ben's voice, though sympathetic, carried a familiar note of skepticism. "Maya, are you sure? The Artem is ancient. You said yourself. Old buildings make all sorts of noises. Maybe it's just the heating system kicking in, or, look, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe your mind's playing tricks." The implication stung. My mind is not playing tricks. I know what I heard. It's too specific, too human. "Have you talked to the landlord?" he asked, shifting tactics. "Not yet. I wanted to be sure." But she wasn't sure of anything anymore, except the crushing weight of her fear. The next morning, driven by a gnawing sense of responsibility and a burgeoning terror, Maya approached Mr. Henderson, the building's landlord. He was a stout man with weary eyes and a perpetually annoyed expression, seated behind a battered desk in a cramped ground-floor office. "Upstairs apartment?" Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow, adjusting his spectacles. "Unit 4B? Empty, miss. Been vacant for months. We're doing some minor repairs before putting it back on the market. No one's living there." Maya felt a chill crawl up her spine, despite the stuffy warmth of the office. "But I hear things, all sorts of noises, dragging, thuds, whispers, and last night, crying, real crying." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "It sounds like someone is in serious trouble." Mr. Henderson sighed, a long, exasperated sound. He tapped a pen against a ledger. "Miss, with all due respect, I personally inspected that unit 2 days ago. It's empty, not a stick of furniture, dust everywhere. If you're hearing things, it's probably just the building settling, like I said, or perhaps your imagination." He fixed her with a gaze that clearly communicated his dismissal. "Perhaps you're still adjusting to the city noise. Happens sometimes." His words echoed Ben's, planting a seed of doubt that twisted in her gut. Was she losing it? Was the trauma, the constant hypervigilance, finally fracturing her grip on reality? The thought was more terrifying than any noise from upstairs. As she walked back down the hallway, her footsteps sounding hollow on the threadbare carpet, Lena emerged from her apartment holding a small watering can. "Everything all right, Maya? You look a little pale." "Just talking to the landlord," Maya replied, her voice clipped. She didn't want to share her escalating paranoia with Lena, who, despite her outward friendliness, still felt off. Lena's smile softened, almost patronizingly. "Ah, old Henderson. He's a character. This old building can be a bit much sometimes, can't it? All the creaks and groans. I've heard them too, especially late at night. Takes some getting used to." She tilted her head, her gaze piercing. "You seem a bit on edge. Are you sure you're sleeping well?" Maya forced a smile. "I'm fine, just adjusting." She hurried past, the conversation leaving her with an even greater sense of isolation. No one believed her. No one understood. That night, the sounds were louder than ever, more defined. A guttural sob, the unmistakable scrape of fingernails against wood, and then a chilling, childlike whimper, fading into a drawn-out moan. It wasn't just a ghost of a sound anymore. It was a physical presence pressing down on her, suffocating her. Her breath hitched. A cold sweat broke out across her skin. The whimpers, the desperation, it was all too familiar. A phantom limb of memory twitched, pain searing through her. The stench of stale blood and fear filled her nostrils, thick and metallic. The air was cold, damp, the chill seeping into her bones. She was curled into a ball, hands clasped over her ears, trying to block out the screams. Not her screams, someone else's, someone she loved. She could hear the muffled thuds, the grunts, the tearing sounds. Her eyes squeezed shut, but the darkness behind her eyelids was a canvas for the horrific tableau playing out just beyond her reach. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moved closer, then paused. A ragged gasp tore from her throat, but no sound escaped. She was frozen, a tiny, terrified witness. The terror wasn't just what she saw, but what she couldn't see, what she could only hear. The silence that followed the screams was the worst. It echoed with absence, with loss, with a primal, inescapable horror. Maya gasped, lurching upright in bed, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The room was dark, silent now, except for the frantic drumming of her own pulse. The flashback had been sudden, brutal, dragging her back to that night, the night everything had changed. The night she had learned the true, visceral meaning of helplessness. She ran a shaky hand through her hair, clutching at her scalp, clutching at her scalp. No, not again. She wouldn't be helpless again. The Ardham building was not settling. The sounds were not her imagination. Someone was in that apartment. Someone was being tormented. And no one, not Ben, not the landlord, not even the overly friendly Lena, was going to help herself. A cold, hard resolve began to solidify within her. Paranoia, perhaps, but if it meant saving someone or proving her own sanity, it was a risk she had to take. The next evening, under the cloak of persistent rain and premature dusk, Maya moved with a quiet, purposeful determination. She'd spent the day researching lockpicking techniques online, her fingers trembling slightly as she watched tutorial videos. She felt a surge of grim satisfaction as she gathered a small kit of tools she'd purchased from a discreet hardware store. She waited until the building was quiet, until the last sounds of distant traffic had faded, until the rhythmic drip of rain against her window pane was the loudest noise. The hall lights of Artem were notoriously dim, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with her own trepidation. Every floorboard creaked beneath her weight, a symphony of decay that seemed to mock her stealth. Reaching Unit 4B, the apartment directly above hers, Maya paused. She pressed her ear against the cold wood of the door. Silence. A profound, unsettling silence. It was far more unnerving than the sounds that had plagued her, a void where screams and whimpers should have been. Her hands, surprisingly steady, went to the lock. The process was painstaking, a delicate dance of metal against metal, guided by touch and instinct. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Sweat beaded on her forehead, cold despite the exertion. Then, with a soft click that resonated like a gunshot in the oppressive silence, the lock gave way. Maya eased the door open, just a crack. Darkness greeted her, thick and absolute. No light seeped from within, no ambient glow of a city street lamp filtered through a window. Just an inky blackness that seemed to swallow all sound. She slipped inside, pulling the door shut behind her, plunging herself into the oppressive void. The air was stagnant, heavy with the smell of old dust and something faintly metallic, the same scent that permeated the building, but stronger here. She fumbled in her pocket for her phone, its flashlight beam cutting a stark swath through the gloom. The beam revealed nothing. The apartment was utterly, profoundly empty. No furniture, no boxes, no signs of life, recent or otherwise. Dust motes danced in the light, thick and undisturbed, covering every surface like a fine gray shroud. Cobwebs clung to the corners of the ceiling, undisturbed for months, perhaps years. It was as if no one had lived here or even visited in a very long time. Her heart sank, a cold, leaden weight in her chest. Had Mr. Henderson been right? Had it all been in her head? Was she truly losing her grip? The thought brought a wave of nausea, a dizzying spiral into self-doubt. But then her flashlight beam swept across the far wall, near where the sounds had seemed to originate. There, carefully positioned on a low, makeshift stand, was a sophisticated speaker system. Not a typical home stereo, but a series of high-fidelity directional speakers, each one meticulously angled downwards, aimed directly at the floor. The wires were neatly concealed, snaking along the baseboards, disappearing into a small, nondescript control box tucked behind the stand. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't random. This wasn't settling pipes. This was intentional, meticulously designed. She moved closer, her fingers brushing against the cold metal of a speaker grill. Then her gaze fell upon a small leather-bound journal resting on the stand beside the control box. It was old, its pages yellowed, but undeniably new to this dust-laden room. With trembling hands, Maya picked it up. The cover felt strangely warm beneath her fingertips. She opened it, the pages rustling softly. Her flashlight illuminated the neat, cursive handwriting within. It wasn't a diary. It was a log. A detailed, terrifyingly precise log. The first entry she saw made her gasp, a strangled sound that caught in her throat. October 24th, 2024, 03:17 a.m. Subject, Maya, Unit 3B. First night reaction, minimal distress. Tapping sequence initiated. Response, minor restlessness. Sleep disturbance, 15%. Promising start. Her blood ran like ice. Subject, Maya, her name, her unit, her first night. She flipped through the pages, each entry a fresh stab of horror. October 27th, 02:45 a.m. Sequence, dragging, muffled cries. Subject showed increased vigilance. Heart rate monitor indicates spike from 70 BPM to 110 BPM. Excellent engagement. November 2nd, 04 a.m. Sequence, whispers, escalating volume, followed by juvenile whimpers. Subject reported sounds to Ben. Dismissal noted. Isolation progressing. Target's paranoia increasing as desired. November 9th, 03 a.m. Sequence, guttural sobs, scraping, child's moan. Deep psychological trigger achieved. Flashback detected. Fear harvest optimal. Fear harvest. The words echoed in her mind, a horrifying confirmation of her darkest suspicions. They weren't just torturing someone. They were torturing her. They were doing it on purpose. And someone was watching. Someone was logging her reactions. Someone knew her past, knew her triggers. A sudden, horrifying realization slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. Lena, her overly friendly neighbor. Lena, who had known about the building's quirks, who had seen her looking pale, who had asked about her sleep. Lena, whose smile always seemed a little too knowing. The journal, it wasn't just a log of sounds. It was a strategy guide, a meticulous blueprint of psychological torment. And the handwriting, it felt familiar somehow. Maya's breath hitched. She flipped quickly to the very last page, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. There, beneath a final, triumphant entry about Maya's escalating fear response, was a small, almost imperceptible doodle. A symbol. A stylized, thorny spiral. She'd seen it before. It was on a small, silver pendant Lena wore almost constantly, nestled against her throat. The horror that washed over Maya was colder, deeper, more primal than any fear the speakers had manufactured. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty. This was calculated, orchestrated, and it was personal. She wasn't just hearing sounds from an empty apartment. She was trapped in a cage of fear, and her friendly neighbor was the one rattling the bars. Maya carefully closed the journal, her mind racing. Every word, every sound, every dismissive glance from Ben and Mr. Henderson suddenly clicked into place, forming a monstrous mosaic of betrayal. The Ardham building wasn't just old, it was alive with a sinister purpose, and she was its prey. Her eyes darted around the empty room again, seeing it not as a vacant space, but as a meticulously crafted stage. The silence that had initially greeted her upon entering now felt like a predatory calm, a held breath before an attack. She clutched the journal to her chest, the cold leather pressing against her pounding heart. Lena. It had to be Lena. But why? What was Fear Harvest? And how many others in this building, this forgotten corner of the city, were involved? The labyrinthine hallways suddenly felt less like a quirky feature and more like a carefully constructed trap. She couldn't go to the police. They wouldn't believe her, not without concrete proof, and a journal filled with cryptic entries about Fear Harvest would only cement their belief in her dissolving sanity. Ben would only tell her to get some rest. She was entirely alone. A shiver, not of cold, but of a chilling, absolute certainty ran through her. She was no longer just a trauma survivor trying to heal. She was a target, and the game had just begun. Her sanctuary had become a battlefield, and the first rule of survival was always the same. If no one else believes you, you have to believe in yourself. And she believed now with a terrifying clarity. She would find out what was happening, and she would fight back. The cold leather of the journal seemed to burn Maya's fingertips as she clutched it, her breath shallow and ragged in the stagnant air of the empty apartment. Every creak of the Ardham building, every drip of rain against the window suddenly sounded like a conspirator's whisper, a tightening knot in a snare laid specifically for her. She wasn't just being targeted, she was being studied, cataloged, her most profound fears turned into a measurable resource. Fear harvest. The phrase was a poisoned barb, chilling her to the bone. Lena. The name resonated with a new, horrifying clarity. The overly friendly smile, the curious gaze, the seemingly innocent questions about Maya's sleep, all were now twisted into instruments of her torment. The truth, when it finally emerged from the fog of her paranoia, was sharper, crueler than any phantom noise. It was not a ghost in the machine, but a very real, very human monster disguised as a neighbor. She couldn't go to the police, not with just a cryptic journal and a story of orchestrated fear. They'd see a trauma survivor unraveling, not a victim of a sophisticated psychological assault. Ben, kind and well-meaning, would offer platitudes about stress and imagination. Maya was utterly, terrifyingly alone in this. But in that crushing isolation, a steel resolve began to form, a desperate, primal need to fight back. She had been helpless once. Never again. Carefully, Maya replaced the journal, leaving everything exactly as she found it. She didn't want Lena to know she had been discovered. Stealth was her only weapon now. She eased out of the apartment, the door clicking softly shut behind her. The silence of the hallway now feeling less like absence and more like a held breath. Back in her own apartment, Maya moved like a shadow. She pulled out the journal she'd risked everything to glimpse, rereading the entries, not for confirmation, but for patterns, for clues. The symbols, the dates, the specific sequences of sound design. It was a language of terror, and she was determined to become fluent. The thorny spiral, Lena's pendant, it was a cult symbol, she was certain. A quick, frantic search online, keywords like fear cults, psychological torment rituals, brought up a terrifying rabbit hole of fringe groups, some ancient, some horrifyingly modern, all preying on vulnerability and emotional pain. The Ardham building, with its forgotten corners and labyrinthine structure, suddenly made chilling sense as a lair. The days that followed were an agonizing tightrope walk. Maya pretended normalcy, forcing smiles for Lena in the hallway, exchanging pleasantries that felt like venom on her tongue. Each interaction was an act of profound self-preservation, a desperate attempt to appear calm, even as her insides screamed. She was constantly hypervigilant, not for sounds from above, but for Lena's subtle cues, for any slip of the mask. The whispers in the building, once auditory illusions, now felt like the low thrum of the cult's unseen presence, a constant, menacing hum beneath her skin. One afternoon, as Lena watered a wilting fern outside her door, her back turned, Maya seized her chance. A small, almost imperceptible click of a lockpick, a technique she'd practiced endlessly in the dead of night, and Lena's door swung inward just enough for Maya to slip through. The air inside Lena's apartment was thick, cloying, smelling of dried herbs and something metallic, a scent Maya was beginning to associate with the very essence of dread. Unlike the bare, dust-choked unit above, this apartment was filled to overflowing, but not with comfort. Every surface was cluttered with strange objects, carved bone fragments, dried flower garlands woven with dark threads, stones etched with the same thorny spiral symbol she'd seen in the journal and on Lena's pendant. Candles, black and red, stood in clusters, their wicks never lit, yet their presence felt sinister. A low, guttural chanting, barely audible, seemed to emanate from a small, ornate speaker tucked away in a shadowed corner, a constant, unsettling drone. Her eyes scanned the room, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying speed. On a small, altar-like table, beneath a draped cloth, she saw it. A small, dark wooden box, intricately carved. And on the lid, unmistakably, was the same thorny spiral symbol. This was where the fear was harvested, stored, whatever fear harvest truly meant. As Maya reached for the box, a voice cut through the stillness, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "Looking for something, Maya?" Lena stood in the doorway, the watering can still in her hand, her face now completely devoid of its former friendliness. Her eyes, once merely curious, were now glinting with a predatory intelligence, a chilling certainty that settled over Maya like a shroud. Maya spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. She tried to steady her voice, forcing courage where only terror now resided. She demanded to know what this was, what all of it meant. The sounds, the journal, the fear harvest. Lena smiled then, a slow, deliberate baring of teeth that had no warmth whatsoever. She explained that Maya was a particularly sensitive instrument, a trauma survivor, a perfect vessel. Her past pain made her exceptionally receptive, a rich harvest. The Ardham building, she continued, was a focal point, an amplifier. The cult, she revealed, needed the pure, unadulterated fear generated from precisely such subjects for their rituals, for the sustenance of their patrons. She spoke of ancient entities, of the power that came from feeding them human suffering. She spoke of Maya's deep-seated helplessness, saying they had merely tapped into what was already there, amplifying it. The words were a brutal blow, stripping away any last vestige of her sanity, confirming her worst nightmares. She was not just a target. She was a farm. Lena took a step closer, the watering can still held loosely in her hand, but her gaze was fixed, unwavering. She said it was a shame, really. Maya had such potential. But now she had seen too much. She moved with a sudden, shocking speed, dropping the watering can, a long, gleaming letter opener appearing in her hand as if from nowhere. Maya recoiled, her mind screaming. This wasn't just psychological anymore. This was physical. This was survival. She had faced this kind of primal terror before, the kind that froze you, bound you. But this time, something shifted. The memories of her past, the horror of what she couldn't prevent, didn't paralyze her. Instead, they ignited a furious, desperate spark. She wouldn't be a helpless witness again. She lunged, not away, but towards Lena, a guttural cry tearing from her throat. The apartment exploded into a desperate, brutal struggle. Maya parried, dodged, the ancient metallic smell in the air now mingled with the acrid scent of adrenaline. Lena was stronger than she looked, surprisingly agile, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. The letter opener flashed, tearing through Maya's sleeve, a sharp sting blooming on her arm. Maya fought with a ferocity born of terror and a lifetime of repressed trauma. She grabbed a heavy carved wooden idol from a shelf, swinging it blindly. It connected with a sickening thud against Lena's temple. Lena stumbled, her eyes momentarily unfocused, but she recovered quickly, lunging again, her face a mask of cold, unwavering intent. The fight was a blur of grunts, strained breathing, and the clatter of objects as they tumbled through the cluttered apartment. Maya remembered a self-defense class years ago, the instructor's words about using an opponent's momentum against them. She saw her opening, Lena lunging, and Maya dropped, sweeping her leg out. Lena fell hard, the letter opener skittering across the floor. Maya was on her in an instant, scrambling, her hands finding a heavy ceremonial cloth. She wrapped it around Lena's head, pulling it tight, muffling the sudden enraged cries. Lena thrashed, her limbs flailing, but Maya held on, her own strength surprising her, a desperate, primal will to survive overriding everything else. Just as Lena's struggles began to wane, a cacophony erupted outside. Shouts, heavy footsteps, the unmistakable blare of a police siren, muffled but distinct. The apartment door burst open with a crash, splintering the frame. Two uniformed officers, guns drawn, stood silhouetted against the dim hallway light, their faces grim and etched with worry. Was Ben. Maya released Lena, who lay still, unconscious, tangled in the heavy cloth. Maya stumbled back, her chest heaving, her body aching, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood dripped from a cut on her arm, a thin crimson trail against her pale skin. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes torn, but her eyes, though wide with shock and exhaustion, held a fierce, triumphant glint. She was alive. She had fought back. She had won. The officers quickly secured Lena, cuffing her, their voices sharp and efficient. Ben rushed to Maya, his hands hovering, asking if she was all right, if she was hurt. Maya could only nod, tears of relief welling in her eyes, blurring the edges of the grim scene. The Ardham building, which had felt like her tomb, now felt like a prison she had just escaped. The suffocating weight of fear lifted, replaced by an intoxicating rush of empowerment. She had faced the monster, and she had survived. Weeks later, the persistent late autumn rain had given way to the crisp, clear chill of early winter. Maya was packing the last of her belongings. Lena had been taken away, the cult a hushed, ongoing investigation, the police still grappling with the bizarre details. Mr. Henderson had been dismissed, replaced by a new, more agreeable landlord. The Ardham building was getting a fresh coat of paint, its sinister aura slowly being scrubbed away. Maya felt a profound sense of lightness. She was moving to a new apartment, far from the Ardham, far from the haunting echoes of her past. A real, fresh start this time. Ben was there, as always, helping her load boxes into a small moving truck. His presence was a comforting anchor, a reminder of the kindness and loyalty that still existed in the world. He joked about her becoming an expert lockpicker, a wry smile on his face, and Maya even managed a genuine laugh. She walked towards the last remaining box in her now empty living room, the one holding her most cherished mementos. Small, sentimental items she couldn't bear to part with. It was an old wooden crate inherited from her grandmother, sturdy and well-worn. As she bent down to lift it, her fingers brushed against the rough grain of the wood. Her gaze fell to the bottom of the box. There, carved subtly into the aged wood, almost imperceptible against the darkened grain, was a symbol. A stylized, thorny spiral. A cold, visceral dread seized her. The world tilted. A memory, sharp and brutal, flashed through her mind. The day she moved in, Ben, always so helpful, assembling her bed frame. His hands, strong and capable, working with a small, sharp carving tool. He had said he was just fixing a loose joint, but she remembered the curious, precise motion of his hand against the dark wood of the bedpost. He had carved something then, a small, dark mark, just beneath the mattress line. Her eyes darted around the now empty apartment, a horrifying understanding dawning. The moving boxes stacked outside, waiting for the truck. Her antique writing desk already loaded. The lamp she had loved. The old armchair. Everything. She suddenly knew, with an absolute, sickening certainty, that if she were to look closely enough, if she were to run her fingers over the underside of every piece of her life, every single belonging, she would find it. The mark. The thorny spiral. The fresh coat of paint on the Artem, the new landlord, the supposed dismantling of Lena's cult. It had all been a performance, a carefully constructed illusion. She wasn't escaping. She was being relocated. From the doorway, Ben stood, watching her. His smile was placid, knowing, not a trace of warmth or concern. Just a serene, terrifying understanding. He raised a hand, not to wave goodbye, but in a silent, chilling benediction. Her friend, her anchor, he was part of it all along. And she, in her triumph, had only sealed her fate. She was not free. She had just been delivered to the next ritual site.